Well, hello and welcome to the Creating Connections podcast, where I bring voices and perspectives from people who are making a difference for children's learning and development. I'm Rachel Stewart, and I'm passionate about connecting with people to share experiences and learn from each other how we can best support children to thrive. As founder and director of Practically Learning, I specialise in developing the capacity of parents and educators through personal development coaching and professional learning programs to build trust, to engage in effective partnerships. In this series of the podcast, we're exploring different people, support networks and organisations who are able to provide a circle of support for you as parents as you navigate your way through the school journey with your children. You will learn from a diverse range of people how they can support you to guide your children to reach their fullest potential as unique and whole people. Today, I'm introducing you to Anne Stringer, who is an author and head of Wellbeing at Peninsula Grammar School in Victoria, Australia. She is passionate about supporting young people and is also on a mission to encourage parents to understand and raise their girls to be confident, resilient, and self-assured young women who are able to overcome contemporary challenges of the complex world they are navigating. Anne has recently written a book titled Weaving the Stories Together, a School Counsellor's Guide to Parenting Young Women. Anne wrote the book to share stories from various young women she's supported and learned from through her work in schools. She also provides tips for parents to encourage them to rethink raising teenagers and to stay with their girls as they move through adolescence. I really hope you feel inspired and supported as you hear from Anne how to parent contemporary young women. So I would like to welcome Anne Stringer to the podcast. So I'd like to officially welcome you to the Creating Connections podcast today. It's really exciting to talk to you about your new book and all about raising girls and raising young women to be confident and secure in themselves, which I guess is a huge topic at the moment and always has been, but particularly now with all the different challenges that our young people are facing in their lives. And of course, in the broader picture of our lives as adults as well, trying to raise them in a world that is quite, I guess, uncertain at the moment, very uncertain. And we're in times where our children are exposed to so many things and so much more than we were, I guess, as young people, with more worries and anxieties about life in general. So welcome to the podcast. I'm sure we'll get into some very deep discussions about raising girls. I myself have two girls that I've raised, and I'm pleased to say they're both doing well, and I'm very proud of both of them and how they've developed into beautiful young women. But it was never easy. It was a journey, and it was quite challenging at times, and still is. As they grow into adults, they have different challenges, but absolute delight to raise girls, and I'm sure you feel the same. So you've got two girls?
I've got one son who is 28, and I've got a daughter who's 24. So I continue to tell her that she's got about 6 months left and then her brain is fully developed and there'll be a different set of expectations. But yeah, yes, they're both amazing, but had very different journeys through their growing up years and still continue to have very different journeys. But young adult daughters are divine. You know, it's wonderful to have a 24-year-old daughter who wants to, you know, hang out with me and wants to have conversations and those kind of things. But you know, it's a very different set of expectations when you have a 14-year-old daughter. So I guess that to give some hope, like they do come out the other end and they, you know, and then they probably, like me, have children and then spend the next 5 years apologizing to your own mother about, oh my goodness, thank you for what you did for me. Yes. But yeah, it can be a difficult journey. Any parenting is a difficult journey. But I guess I wanted to focus on young women for this book. I've actually been asked to collaborate in another book on raising young men by somebody who works at a boys' school. So that's exciting.
Okay.
So it's as legitimate, but I worked in a girls' school for 16 years and now have worked in co-ed education for the last sort of 8 or 9 years. But at that time, I really just felt like there were pieces of wisdom that were being presented to me every day as a counselor in a privileged space to hear their stories that I wanted to document it. I wanted to document their knowledge and their wisdom. And I also, and this is going back a number of years ago, I kind of went searching for a book that did focus just on young women. And thank you. That did just focus on young women and was a very practical, affirming guide for parents. And I guess I just didn't find what I would have wanted and what I thought would be something very useful and helpful to parents raising young women. So
You
I
saw the
thought
gap.
I'll just give it a go.
Yeah, and it's interesting because we're sort of told when we're parents of young children, oh, wait till they get to the teenage years, you won't be able to cope, and all these sorts of negative sort of
Yes.
pictures that you have in your mind. But I guess in my own parenting, I was really determined to not have that viewpoint and to really enjoy getting to know them as teenagers and to listen to them and try and it wasn't that easy sometimes. And of course, they start to push you away. And as a parent, you go through so many changes yourself to be able to navigate their changes in personality and circumstances and the different things that they're going through.
Yeah.
So
That's
I
right.
guess in the book that you've written, you share some stories from young people who you've counselled, and I suppose you've had an insight, a deeper insight into what is actually happening in their world. What are some of the biggest challenges you've been seeing that they're really grappling with at the moment?
Well, I do think it's that notion. I mean, I remember, and I don't think this is in the book, but I remember talking to a 12-year-old young woman, and she didn't want to have her 13th birthday party because she had heard that once she became a teenager, she had to be disconnected to her parents. She had to slam doors and scream and shout. And I think, what are we doing? What are we doing to our young people? I think the thing that I found most around having, as I say, a very privileged position on not being the disciplinarian, not having to worry about them as parents do, and not having to teach them any curriculum, I could have conversations that were much more freeing. And supportive of their point of view. And I guess the thing that I found in those conversations is that families are really important. Families are really important. What their parents think is really important. Yes, they push back. Yes, they complain. But at the end of the day, some of their complaining is around, their love and concern that their parents would get angry at them or they would disappoint them. So I think this notion that kids don't need their parents during adolescence is a discourse that's been very destructive and not fair on parents or on young people. The relationship between parents and adolescents, of course, is very different to the relationship between parents and young children in terms of the way, the interactions and the supervision and the boundaries. But I think it is the point in which young people need their parents more than ever. They need them in a different way, but they need them more than ever. And they need them to set boundaries. I'm just about to do a brain development workshop with the year 9s and talking about why do you need your parents? You know why? Because you can't make good decisions and see the whole picture and all the consequences. So guess what? Friends are important, but parents are important as well when you're needing to be guided about that risk taking. So I think it is very much the time. And, working with young women across 7 to 12, in year 12, when I had, again, the privilege of reflecting back with their times, they were saying, oh, I'm so glad my parents pulled me in. I'm so glad that they stopped me from going in a direction that I didn't want to go. And that might be pathways in terms of academic work. It might be social. It might be safety stuff, mental health stuff, all those different things. But I guess the other thing that I'm finding more and more, and this is probably in the last, 5 or 10 years, is that young people have a literacy around mental health and around different elements of difficulties that I never had growing up. It was just like grin and bear it, or get over it, or if you didn't vomit, go to school. There wasn't that, and I think in some ways, naivety was a bonus because you just get on, but you find that 40-year-olds all of a sudden fall apart and you think, why was that? So, there's those pros and cons. But I think alongside of that, there's been kind of this expectation that they should be happy and feel settled all the time.
Yeah.
Adolescence is not a time of happiness and settledness all the time. So we need to be realistic about having a strong emotion or feeling a bit unsettled or feeling confused and worried. That's just going through adolescence. You don't have depression. You don't have a significant mental health issue. You're just going through a rough patch. It's a speed hump.
Yes.
So I think we need to find some literacy that doesn't bring it from 0 to 100. And I think we do that through the media with parents as well. If your child misses a meal, they've got an eating disorder. If they're in the room listening to sad music, they've got depression.
Yeah.
It takes a lot to diagnose a kid with a very serious mental health issue. And there's a lot in the middle. There's a lot in the middle that we can still parent, we can still support, we can still have conversations about. But we also need to be normalizing some of these ebbs and flows and ups and downs and strong emotions and responses without pathologizing them.
Yes.
And without having these expectations that if school doesn't go well for you every day in every way, there's either a problem with you or there's a problem with school. There's probably
Yes.
not either. So I think that we have gone almost the other way in that we're having so many extreme conversations. We're forgetting that adolescence in itself is a turbulent time of people's lives.
And
And it
even
will always be.
And even in the younger years, and I think it does start in the primary school years, particularly I think around the age of 8 and 9, where they start their hormones start to change and they start to test the boundaries with you. And they're almost like mini teenagers at that age where they're testing the waters. And I think it really is about explaining to kids why they might be feeling that way. So and normalizing it. So, like you say, so that I think that they're seeing a lot of other children at school being diagnosed with different learning disorders and challenges, and so they automatically think they have something if they get something wrong on their schoolwork. So there must be something wrong with me, and that's a really unhealthy way of thinking if they're constantly thinking, oh, what's wrong with me? Things aren't going right for me. So how can parents, I guess one way is really explaining, no, this is how life is. We go through ebbs and flows and we have to learn how to navigate different things that happen to us. And how would you suggest that parents actually tackle that? And how do they know the difference between when a child is needing extra support or if it's just a normal, teenage, I guess, challenges that they normally go through?
Yeah, and I think that's the scariest bit for the parents. It's really scary to navigate, what can I do if I'm worried about my child? How do I figure out, should I be really worried or should I just let it go and see what happens? And I think every parent needs to be reaffirmed to trust their gut. They've known their child from day dot. And I say that to them all the time. We can be experts as psychologists or parent coaches or teachers in our field, but they're the experts in their child. So it's about changes that are beyond what they would expect of child development. So it's about knowing a little bit about child development. So and also the time frame, so if something happens to your daughter and they've had adolescence, they've had a breakup or they've had difficulties with their friends and they're a bit sad and they're a bit moody and they're a bit emotional for 2 or 3 weeks, totally normal. If it goes on for 12 weeks and they start withdrawing from activities, they start actually being really negative on an ongoing basis, they start withdrawing from you or things that they love and enjoy, okay, well, that becomes a problem. So some of it is about time, some of it is about changing and withdrawing in the behavior. But some of it is also about giving them some literacy and some way to say, I feel really sad. I feel really upset. I feel really disappointed, rather than I feel depressed or I feel really nervous about this, rather than I've got some anxiety. They Google these words and these words have weight. So it's about parents using words that aren't weighted in the short term. Like, seems like you're really disappointed about that. You know what? There can be real disappointments. Good on you for keep going, keep trying, really affirming ways that they're actually walking back into life after disappointment. I've just seen 4 girls at the end of term that didn't get into the role that they wanted for production. Really disappointed. Their hearts were set on it, but they don't have depression. They don't get out of going to maths. They're disappointed. They go home, watch a sad movie, and they give themselves some time to be disappointed. And then they jump back in and do the role that they had been chosen to do as good as they can, at their very best. So it's about having those conversations. But the other thing, and I think COVID has impacted this a little bit, but also this expectation that parents are supposed to feel like their child should be happy all the time, is the parent has to sit with that sadness or disappointment. They need to sit alongside their child and say, I can see you're really sad about this. And I don't know how many conversations I've had with parents. They ring and they go, my child is really sad. We need to fix it. No, we don't. We just need to let them be sad. Like, it's okay. It's okay to feel sad. They will recover. They are strong enough. It's believing in. And I tell you, the thing that I have learned from working with young people for many, many years, they are stronger than you think. They do bounce back. If they are given that ability to. So in the olden days, we used to quiet them down and say, don't be sad, get over it. It's not important. Now we're saying, oh my goodness, you're disappointed. It's going to move to depression. You need to say, it's actually okay to be sad. It's okay to cry. It's okay to feel really disappointed. And it's okay to feel really shitty that you didn't get whatever you wanted to get, or you did poorly on a test.
And it's really important to share.
Time frame.
I think it's important for parents to share their own stories as well. I know I've had conversations with my kids, like my son, for example. He's been trying to get into the A team of football, and he keeps getting put in the B team and then put on the bench. And, it's very disappointing. But I've shared stories with him where I tried to get into the A team of netball for years. It took me years and years to get there. And I finally got into the A team, and then I got sick and I couldn't play. So then I had to constantly deal with that disappointment, but I shared with him how I dealt with it, and that I just kept, I knew that I was capable of doing it. I just kept trying. And you're not always going to get the thing that you're looking for straight away. And that's how you navigate things as an adult as well. So helping parents understand that sharing those types of stories can sometimes help at the right time. And also for them to know that when you learn these skills now, it helps you when you're an adult, because there will be disappointments, but there'll be other things that happen to you that are fantastic. So that's why these things happen when you're young. And then as you get older, you grow, you have the skills to be able to manage when things don't go your way. So, and I think I'm hearing that resilience is really challenging a lot of kids now.
Yeah, and I think the parents need to trust that their kids are resilient. I think that the worry that we put on parents that their kids are going to just break, or that there's something wrong with them. I go back to you saying that if they do bad on maths, do they have a learning difficulty? You know what? One, they might just not be that great at maths and they might need to put more effort. Or two, it just might be that, they're having a rough patch, or they don't understand that topic, but they don't necessarily have a learning difficulty. I think the jumping into going and being assessed has become a really, and again, it might be COVID, or it might just be wanting to rule in or rule out, or that early intervention. And I'm a believer in early intervention. I oversee the Department of Learning Services at my school. I completely believe in making sure that children are known as a learner, that adjustments are made that need to be made. It can make a big difference. But boy, I just feel like there's so many kids that they just can't have a bad term. Like we need to be really careful about jumping into these things without giving them some time to kind of, the teachers might be able to try a few things. So there might be some other things that are going on in their lives. Parents say, we're going through a separation. And at the same time, I think my child has ADHD because they're not focused. Well, they're not focused because you're going through a separation,
They've got a lot of things going on in their minds.
There's context around what's going on in their minds. And kids focus their brains on what is the priority, and on their priority at that time is to make sure that everybody in the family is okay and that they have a safe place to land. And if there's conflict or confusion or some uncertainty about that, their brain is going to focus on that, not on maths. You know, they're not good at compartmentalizing and tuning out. They bring what's happening at home to school with them. And you know, so I find we need to be really careful to understand if there's other things happening for kids that are particularly adolescents. And sometimes parents will say, oh, they've got no idea that we're separating. Yeah, they do.
Yeah.
A
They pick
14-year-old
up on
knows
everything.
everything. They know everything, or they don't know what's happening, but they know something is wrong. So they speculate. So
Yeah.
they come up with all sorts of amazing 14-year-old brain stories about what might be happening if they don't know. And again, my job is not to tell parents when to tell their kids, how to tell their kids, what boundaries to put on kids, but they need to know that if there is something happening in the system that is not working, if they don't have a conversation with their young person, that young person will come up with a whole range of other ideas, or
Yeah.
will talk to 4 other 14-year-olds about what might be happening, and them as a group might come up with amazing things that are happening in the family. So I guess it's worth considering. It's worth knowing those things. And they're probably not going to do well on their tests while all of this is happening, because their focus is going to be on relational. Girls are relational. So if there's relationships that aren't working, that's going to be their focus. That's what they're going to be attending to, attuned to. It all comes back to relationships with teachers, relationship with families, relationship with their friends. That's the driving force. And there's a neurological and a biological as well as a social element to that, but girls are more so attuned to what's happening with my relationships.
Oh, absolutely. And they're usually the challenges that you're dealing with at home as a parent, and the fallout from any relationship issues. And I think the biggest problem with the way that we have been conditioned as parents to always focus on the outcome of our children's education rather than really just being with them on the journey and seeing their progress, but also talking with them about their learning rather than thinking that they always have to do well on tests and they always have to get good marks. And I find myself doing that myself and thinking, oh, I need to do more because my son's getting a C in some subject, and I'm sort of starting to question my own parenting if I'm not doing enough. And I think that that's the positioning and the conditioning that we've been exposed to, whether it's through the media or just through talking with other parents and comparing our kids and all that sort of thing. And it just adds extra pressure on our kids that they don't need. And we really need to have empathy and put ourselves in our kids' shoes and remember they're actually still so young, they're still learning, and they need our encouragement rather than our judgment of their school report or their results, and really just tuning into them and understanding where they're at this time, and then helping to guide them through that. And yeah, they're watching their parents all the time and learning from them. We tend to forget that as parents as well, that we're the lighthouses, we're the models, and we need to be intentional about that and really understand, okay, if I'm behaving this way, this is going to impact my kids. And I need to really stand up and be the adult and show them how to move through problems and how to move through challenges and be open and honest. And it's not always easy, but it's definitely needed. I wanted to ask you, just talking about relationships with girls, there's a chapter in your book about bullying versus conflict. And I really want to explore that because it's an interesting topic, because bullying seems to be one of the biggest challenges in our schools and outside school now with social media, and parents are navigating those challenges themselves, trying to understand how to support their kids. What would you say is the difference between bullying and conflict? Because it's sort of, I guess there's a bit of crossover there, but also how are we teaching girls, or how can we teach our girls to deal with conflict and not be afraid of having those difficult conversations?
Yeah, I think that's really pivotal. And that, I mean, I'm talking about conflict versus bullying in grade 2. So I'm starting it really early at our school, because I think it's one of those they and I think the difference between bullying and conflict in terms of the behavior is quite clear, but the emotional feeling that goes along with both for a young person whose brain is developing is the same. That's where the confusion comes. So bullying is targeted, it's relentless, it's ongoing, it's often one-sided, it's in a position of power, and it can have profound and huge impact on somebody's mental health over long periods of time. And it needs to be managed really differently to conflict. But most of the time at schools that are managed really well with really good protocols and procedures, it's around conflict. And so conflict is more two-sided. It is more around a disagreement, miscommunication, feeling hurt by something. It might be a response to what we call mean on purpose, that use strong language, mean on purpose, or one-off incident. That's not bullying. That's being mean. So there's mean on purpose, there's bullying, and there's conflict. So those things are quite different in terms of their lanes. But mean on purpose, so a one-off mean comment or being mean to somebody one day can lead to conflict, because they might then have a fight about what they've done. But in a young person's brain, and in a young woman's brain whose relationship is everything, and also not being able to see from the other person's perspective because the brain hasn't fully developed, all they feel is, I'm hurt, I've been harmed, people have been mean to me, and I feel wounded. So they go home and they say, I've been bullied, because that's how they experience it. So they're not lying, right? That's how they feel. And they've got illiteracy. I've been bullied. I've been attacked, because it's hard for them to take account of what they might have done to contribute, but also they feel really hurt. And when you feel really hurt, or when somebody's being really nasty to you, the literacy says you've been bullied. And also it gets attention from your parent. If you go home and say, I've had a fight with Jane, oh, well, solve it. If you go home and say, I'm being bullied, the parents say, right, I'm listening now, whereas conflict can be as difficult and as hurtful as bullying in that immediate moment for the young person. So, and my kids hated it, particularly my daughter, when they'd come home and say, oh, such and such be really mean to me. I'd say, okay, but tell me about the situation. Do you think there's anything that you might have done? Is there any way that you might have contributed to it not going well? Do you think there's been a disagreement, And then I tell them, this is what bullying is this been going on for weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks? Is it only one-sided? Have you never said anything back? Have you blocked them? Have you done everything that you can to kind of move away from that? Of course, no, no. And then it's about, okay, so how do we manage that differently? And look, the kind of protective instinct is to ring to school and say, my child's being bullied, you need to do it. And to demonize, some parents even go the other extreme, they ring the other parent. Never goes well. Never goes well. So then you've got two protective people saying, your child's doing this, your child's doing that.
Yes.
And the worst outcome is that, guess what? The next day, Jane and Josie make up, and then the parents are fighting, and Jane and Josie, and you've said all these terrible things about Josie, and Josie's at your house next week. And you've said, don't hang around with her. She's not a very nice girl. She's a bully, wherever. And then Josie's all of a sudden coming over, and they're besties again. You haven't caught up. So there's a whole range of things and ways parents can get caught in this situation, because often girls have a fight, they call it bullying, they resolve it the next day, they're best friends again. So it's about giving them skills. Conflict is normal. Conflict needs to be managed differently. How do you actually communicate? And we go through this very explicitly in terms of looking at different perspectives. So we show that, I don't know if you know that perspective, but it's a kind of an old woman and a young woman in one photograph. So if you look, some kids see the old woman, some see. So I show that to the grade sixes to say, what do you see? Who's right? Neither's right. It's just a different perspective. So getting them to see that if one person sees it in one way and the other person sees it in the other way, it's just a different perspective. There's no right or wrong, but that can bring conflict because you stand by your own perspective. So how can you listen to the other person's perspective and see how they've experienced the conversation or the situation or the incident that's occurred. And I think these skills need to be explicitly taught. And I think schools
Absolutely.
are trying to do that. And I think they have a responsibility to do that. But parents also need to engage with their daughters, which can bring some pushback, but some honest conversations about, are you sure there isn't anything that you can do? You and Josie have been friends for a really long time. Bully is a really strong word. Are you sure there aren't, other ways? Having said that, if your child is being bullied, it needs to be managed immediately. It needs to be managed really differently. You don't have a restorative conversation with a kid who's been bullied for 4 months by a group of 4 other girls. You just don't. So I think that those things have to be very carefully looked at and thought through, and the conversations need to unpack what has actually happened rather than jumping into some conclusions.
Yes. So how would you handle that situation if a parent did come to the school and say, my child has been bullied? How would you manage that situation and guide the parent and the child through that process?
Yeah. Look, the first thing is that you have to listen to a parent that rings you. They're upset, they're worried, they're coming from a position of love and care, and they deserve to be heard. So that's the first thing. You hear what they're saying, you hear their distress. You say, look, I want to look at this. I want to take this on, and I hope that you can trust that we need to have, you've got one piece of the pie. We need to go and look at all the other pieces of the pie and get back to you and talk to you about what the other different perspectives are. It may be that your child is being bullied and this is our policy and this is what we will do if this is the case, but it might be conflict. And if this is what we will do and this is the case. So being really honest and transparent with the parents, and then get back to them. Get back to them. Have
Yes.
another phone call. Don't just shoot an email and say we've sorted it. These are parents. These are parents of young people. Ring them and say, look, this is the conversation that we've had. Go, have a chat to your daughter, see how they experience a conversation. Get back to us if you're worried. Most parents are reasonable. Most parents want a solution. But I would also say to the parent, trust the school. Like, you're the expert on your kids, but I tell you, we are the expert on navigating between bullying and conflict. And we have access to all the players, right? And we don't take favorites. Teachers are amazing at investigating what has actually happened from all the different angles and all the different perspectives, and then coming to me and saying, this is the landing, what's actually happening. And what you'll find is most girls between 7 and 9, if they think they're being bullied, they're in conflict. Like, and I'm going from schools where I've worked at. There may be other schools that things aren't managed well, and it can move into bullying if it doesn't get managed. We try and get in there straight away when it's conflict, and make sure that there is a restorative and there are clear expectations about behavior, and there are clear expectations about, we've called you on the mean on purpose. You're saying it was a misunderstanding. You apologize, but it can't happen again. So, and that goes from very young, and having some real life consequences. So, I hope that parents have somebody that they feel that they can talk to at the school, that they can trust, that they are sending their child there every day for a lot of the day. So I hope they have somebody there that they can trust, but they also need to then trust them. Their opinion might be different to their daughters. And they're the adults and they're the ones having lots of conversations. So it might be different, and you need to take on their perspective at least as strongly as your daughters. So I think we have also moved into a global space that we think we're the experts on everything, and we're kind of not giving medical and science the space of being the experts in those situations, and their opinions are higher than ours, right? So somebody who has an opinion about whether vaccines are safe, I would trust a doctor over somebody that has been on Facebook, right? But we're not. We're saying everybody should have a right to have the same opinion and have the same, a value of their knowledge. I would say the same. Schools should be able to have a level of trust and faith that their understanding of the situation is more accurate than one year 7 girl that goes home. Now, it's not to say that you don't wrap your arms around her, you don't say this is really hard, this is really difficult, but you also need to trust that there is a level of expertise in that arena. And the other thing I would say along that is that get your child back to school, whatever that looks like, whether they have to come to Wellbeing, whether they have a timeout card, whether they come half a day, because the more they sit at home and ruminate about what might have happened or what might happen, they build a whole story and they've got a whole bunch of information around what they think they're going to have that's going to happen, and they have no real data about what going into a class actually looks like. So I
Yeah.
always say to the students, come to school and collect some data about what is really the impact, and then come back to me and say, this is as bad as I thought, or this is better than I thought. But collect some real data, rather than sitting at home and assuming or preempting or worrying that it's going to look like a certain way. So that's another really big tip that I would say. That's really hard when you've got 14-year-old that doesn't want to go to school. There is nothing
And it's
so
becoming a huge issue. I think there's around 43,000 students in Australia, and they're the ones that have been reported who are homeschooling now. And it is becoming a challenge for parents to get their children to school. And I guess what we're talking about here really is there's so many different influences around our children now. And so as a parent, it's really hard to navigate that because often you don't know what they're watching on social media, and they're being influenced by not just their peers now, but other people who they don't even know, strangers, who are telling them things that they're believing. And I'm wondering how you see that happening too, where there's so many different influences now, particularly for girls, and they really grab onto those trends really quickly. And as a parent, it's really challenging to navigate that. I remember, when the likes of Paris Hilton came out, and she was a huge influencer and people wanted to be like her. And now there's, the Kardashians and a few other famous people that our young girls aspire to be like. And we know as parents that, well, they're not necessarily the best role models or influencers. How can we as parents, I guess, rein them back in a little bit from that and try and share with them that, the people who are your real role models are the ones who are supportive of you, who are showing you how to behave, as a young woman and as a respectful person who respects themselves, and who's not constantly seeking validation. How do we actually navigate that with parents?
Yeah, and I think again that how much control, how much access, how much knowledge do you have about what your young person is doing? And we can all say you should know everything. You don't, and that's unrealistic, and it sets parents up to fail. Although I have had conversations with parents who give their child a phone in grade 6 or year 7, and they say, I've just trusted them. That's the time to say, okay, I'm giving you a tool that you're probably not ready for in lots of ways. What are the boundaries and parameters? And I would hope that each parent sets those boundaries before they actually hand them the phone, and not try and put in boundaries in year 9 and say, oh gosh, they're on the phone all night now. Set them up, because then, the horse is bolted. That's exactly right. In terms of influencers, look, you condemn one and another one comes up, right? You can't keep up. It's like the social media sites. You can't keep up to a degree. You probably need to know, like for boys, Andrew Tate was a really toxic one. So I think having knowledge about whether there is really toxic, influential people getting on the internet and saying some really, really disrespectful and unfortunate things. But I think what parents just need to do is model good role models, like sit down and watch the Olympics with your kid and say, these are doers. Look at these amazing women achieving these amazing things. They're healthy. They're not skinny. Look at the cyclists. Look at the swimmers. They're just healthy humans. They're not sitting at a bar with their matching bag and their matching glasses, things like that. And have positions on certain things. I remember watching we weren't allowed to watch The Bachelor or The Bachelorette in my household. I just said, no, I'm not, and then my daughter came home and she begged and pleaded and said, I've been watching it all week at my friend's house and I need to see the final, the final whatever, outcome. And I lasted about 10 minutes because, the woman was saying, well, I kind of love him, but then I kind of love him. And I just said, you know what? I'm out. You can watch it. That's yours. But I just want to say, if you are actually making a decision to spend your life with somebody and you're taking 10 minutes to decide who you love, to me, that's not love. Maybe the world is changing too fast. Maybe I'm delusional. Maybe I'm just an old person, but stick with your values. Like I just said, I'm going to bed. I can't watch it. It doesn't fit with my ethics. So make a stand, be explicit about why you believe certain things. My parents started and I've continued dinner table arguments. Ready, go. If you, my niece had a 45-minute argument with her brothers and nieces and nephews and aunts and uncles and grandparents about whether the Kardashians was a legitimate way of spending her time watching that show versus watching soccer, right? And you know what? She won because she's the most articulate, amazing human being on earth. And she could argue her part. She's saying, I know they're ridiculous. I know that I don't want to be like them, but it's entertainment. Soccer is entertainment for you. This is entertainment for me. I'm old enough to know that. Now, she was probably 23 when she was saying that. Very different for a 13 or 14-year-old who's influenced more. But, bring it to the table. What's your argument?
Yeah.
How come? What are you doing?
Have those robust discussions and get them to explain what do you actually find interesting about this show? Or these people?
Tell me about it,
I mean, there are good qualities in those people because they've made, they're very successful in their careers.
Absolutely.
What can we point out that is, a good role model in them, in those people that they're watching and being influenced by? And I guess there are a lot of young women who have become successful online as influencers. And I suppose it's not necessarily a bad thing to aspire to be an influencer.
Yeah.
Which we would ascertain as a leader, being a leader in a certain area, as long as you have those leadership qualities. So even just talking about with girls about, okay, so what makes a good leader and what makes that person a good influencer?
So why? The question is why are they? Yeah. And what qualities and what values do you align with? Like what, I mean, I've had lots of conversations with young women about Taylor Swift, for example, and she celebrates being a woman. She celebrates being safe. She celebrates success. She celebrates joyfulness. And yay, and she is very honest. She's had her own difficult journey. A lot of young women say who we want to hear from is we want to hear real stories of people that understand our lives. So there is some legitimacy to these people coming out and sharing their stories and legitimizing, standing up for yourself, legitimizing being proud of who you are, legitimizing not being perfect, legitimizing having your own mental health journey. I think these are really powerful things for people to hear, that you can get through these things, that you can get help. And I think they probably listen to them more than others. So we don't want to underestimate them. We just want to make sure that they're not at their other end having influenced by people who are really sending messages that are very very disturbing or very destructive or very negative. And that's where I think that line is crossed. And then some of it they'll just grow out of, like they'll be really fixated on somebody at the moment, and then in 12 months they'll shift and change. So I think we just need to let them ride the trends rather than try to argue against it. But I remember working in a school, and they said, "Oh, you have to watch Big Brother to link with girls. They won't link with you unless you know all the characters of Big Brother." And I thought, baloney! I'm not going to watch Big Brother. I'm going to say to them, "Great, tell me what you like about them, but I don't know them because I'm going to be my authentic self. I'm going to be who I am." And I think as a parent, that's important for you to be your authentic self as well. Go for your life, watch Kardashian, but I don't want to. Like that's just not what I do. So I think just pretending like you want to be your child's best friend and you want to sit and watch these shows, like, you know what? Watch them to understand them,
Yeah.
but then say, you know what? I'm out. I don't want to spend. That's not how I want to spend my time. So then you're modeling something different as well, which I
Yeah.
think is important.
Yeah, I think it really is important. Like if you do sit down with them and watch it, so you can understand what they're actually consuming. I do remember when my girls were young, they were watching Hannah Montana and they started talking with an American accent and with attitude. So, which, it's not that bad to have a bit of an attitude, but not
Yeah,
in a rude way. So I put a stop to that show and gave them the reasons, though. These are
yeah,
the reasons I don't
yeah,
want you to watch that show. I think you need to choose another one. So instead of just saying you can't do that anymore, give them an alternative and then get them to choose. So then I think it becomes a bit of a power play, especially as they get older.
yeah. They
And
go underground.
yeah,
If
as parents,
too many black and white limits. Yeah,
we want to have control as
yeah,
well, because when they're younger, you have a bit more control and to manage things. But in the teenage years, I found, and maybe you can share how you would suggest parents do this, is that your role is more like a coach, and
mm,
you're still guiding them, coach and mentor, still guiding them with some advice, and I call it planting seeds,
mm,
and just planting seeds in their minds of to think about,
mm,
and but also asking them questions to get them to find the answers so that
yeah,
then they can understand why they do things or why they've made those choices. But yeah, really setting those boundaries is so important, particularly in the teenage years. um, I had a rule in my house that there was no swearing. But all the songs had swear words in them. All the TV shows started having swear words. All the kids at school were swearing, and they kept saying to me, "What's wrong with it, Mum? Everyone does it." And I said, "Well, because they're my rules. You
mm,
can swear I know you probably swear with your friends,
mm,
but I prefer you don't swear in my house, in
mm,
front of me or in front of your grandparents, and in front of people like on the train and those sorts of things. When you're out in public, you need to actually show respect." So yeah,
mm.
and for parents to really have those ground rules and stick to them and really be strong enough to be able to stick to them without trying to seek control, I guess, is
Yeah. And I think setting those things up in a conversational way rather than in a conflictual way,
yeah.
and having reasons why, and every families would have, and I talk about, letting some things go to the keeper, because there's going to be some things that you just got to let go. Mine was the kids' rooms,
Pick your battles.
love to have a clean room, but you know what? If you're not going to, these are the boundaries. But where are you going to pick your battles and where you're not going to pick your battles? And every family would have different things. For you, it was swearing. For me, it was honesty. As long as you're truthful and you're honest about what you say. And the other thing about swearing is that I said, look, if you say a swear word, that's very different than calling somebody something that's a swear word. So I differentiated between that. So there was a difference between it coming across as quite harmful to another person because you were swearing and calling them a name that was a swear word versus just saying a swear word. So we all have our different takes on what we tolerate, what we don't, and every family operates and works differently. But I also think that there's a line where, you know, are you having conversations that you know that your child is safe when they're going out and being involved in things? And do you have a conversation where if they don't feel safe, they have an option to call you? And the thing that I find with young women particularly is if they know that their parents' first reaction in that moment is not going to be fury and anger, they'll call them. Now, you can be angry later. I'm not endorsing not being angry at your kid for being stupid or breaking curfew or going to a party they weren't allowed to. And I say to girls all the time, anger is love. Your parents' angry response is because they love you and they worry about you, and it just comes out as anger, and then underneath it, it's actually love and care. But if you can, in those moments, say, you know what, we're going to talk about this later, but what do you need now? And I'm talking about 15, 16, 17-year-olds. What do you need now to be safe? Do you need me to come and pick you up? Do you need me to ring somebody? Do you, what do you need? And to have that plan, that pre-plan, because girls are very loyal to each other, but they can also ditch each other. So if
Yeah.
they get a better offer, they're out. And then all of a sudden, this girl's at a party on her own. She's got no way harm. She doesn't really know where she is. They need to be able to call you. And they need to be able to say, this is what I need. And the other thing that I think, again, this has been a tip from our generations, is that, I said to both my kids, if you don't want to do something and you have to save face because you're going to look like a dork, or you're going to look like you're a loser, or you're not, mature enough or whatever. If you don't want to do it, you just say, I'm not allowed. Mum won't let me. And I said, I'll always back you. I will always 100% say, yep, I was the witch, and they had a better excuse, say, oh, Mum's so paranoid, she works in a school, she sees all these terrible things happening and she's really paranoid. And I just said, just say no. And my mother said the same thing to me. Just say, my mum's really strict, I'm not allowed. And then you've got an out clause and it's legit. And if you're feeling this isn't going to go well, or I don't feel ready for this, or I don't really want to do this, but my friends are really pressuring me, just use that out card. So it's about having these conversations, sitting down and having these conversations before it happens.
Yeah.
So, it's predicting and preempting and saying, if this situation happens, what would you do? If this situation, and not being scared. By saying if this situation happened doesn't mean that your child is going to say, ooh, let's do that. That sounds fun. They're going to know that you are actually wanting to set them up for, it's like we used to say, don't talk about sexual abuse, because then don't talk about sex, because then that will promote kids having sex. We know it's the opposite.
Yeah.
Talking about it, being explicit about it, developing a plan. And I say to kids when I'm talking about child safety and all the different stuff, in particular with 10s to 12s about going to parties, pre-plan. What's your out plan? If you're not safe, what do you do? Who do you call? Who are the 5 people that you can call? Maybe it's an older sibling. Great. Call the older sibling. Have a pre-plan. Because at that moment, it's hard to scramble your brain to come up with a good plan. So you need a pre-plan so that you know how to get out.
Absolutely. And giving them scenarios is so important so that they can think about it in that moment and think, oh, what would I do if that happened? I asked my daughter, she had all her friends over one day, and we were talking about that. And I said, what happens if one of your friends came up to you and offered you drugs? Would you say yes? Would you take it? And they're like, oh, no, our friends wouldn't do that. I said, well, you just don't know. You might meet people in the future who could be into drugs. And what do you say when that happens? What do you do? And they were like, oh, wow, I wouldn't even think of doing that. But so important to have those conversations, because not that you want to put fear into them and you don't want to.
And it may never happen. And if it doesn't, that's great. Yeah.
But then when you've done that, you can trust them later on as they get older to make the right choices. I don't worry about my girls at all, because I know that I've had those conversations with them, and my son as well. And I know they'll make the right choice because they'll have thought about it and they know what the right choice is.
Yeah.
And
I guess the other thing is that if they don't make the right choice, they know where to come.
Okay. And they know where to come.
Every young person develops differently. They're in different situations. And so, even 22 and 23-year-olds might make stupid decisions, but at least they know where to come. They know that they can land somewhere and have that conversation and talk about, without judgment, what's actually happened and what help they do need, because you are not just your child's best counselor and best advocate and best coach through their adolescence. It's through their life, and if you can develop that through their lives, it never ends. Like, it's exhausting. Like, I still worry about my 28-year-old son. Like, that's just ridiculous, but I do. So,
they're always kids, aren't they?
They're always with us, and they're always of concern to us, and that's about love. You can't turn it off. You can't turn it off, and it doesn't go away. And yes, it does change again as they become young adults, but then I imagine that it changes again when they have their own kids. Like, I don't know, I'm not a grandparent yet, but I imagine that there's a whole nother phase in which you're worried about, your child as a parent and as a child and as
As a parent
a
themselves.
parent themselves. So, and also worried about your grandchildren. So it's a lifetime a challenge and it's a lifetime joy. And we are privileged. There are many people in this world that have not had the opportunity to have children for whatever reason that might be. So we are privileged to have children, particularly those of us who have healthy children, who have been able to grow and learn and develop in an incremented way. I mean, I know that there are people who are struggling with their children for whatever reason are not on that pathway. They may have some neurodiversity, they might have some other forms of disability, they might have illnesses, and their path is extra demanding and extra difficult.
Yeah.
So we are in a privileged position to have children who are healthy and well and able to grow and learn. And I think that's getting back to that idea about achievement. How do you define achievement? And every family will define it differently. And again, having high aspirations for your children is not a bad thing. Wanting them to have doors open for them is not a bad thing. And I would never curtail that. Having high expectations, if they're bright kids, having high expectations that they achieve. But I do think that there is a real mismatch with the information coming to say, love your child, whoever they are. We want to grow good humans. We want to do this. But then the last week of the results coming out in year 12, it's ATAR scores. It doesn't define you. It's like every media outlet is talking to kids about what their score is. So it's a contradiction, and parents have to live with these contradictions all of the time. And it's confusing and it's frightening. And I hope that each parent has a team around them that can be a sounding board, that can be somebody that can talk with them without judgment about, how do you make decisions, particularly if you're a single parent. I'm in a partnership and I've raised my child with their father, their biological father, who, that has made it that we make joint decisions, so I feel for those families that have more complexities or don't have that backup. They also have a more difficult role. And I think the worst thing that we can do as schools or as practitioners or as people in society is judge people for struggling and judge them for sometimes making mistakes and not making the right call or losing it when they didn't mean to. You know what? We all make mistakes. We're all imperfect. And an apology, if you've lost it with your child, goes a long way. And they're actually quite forgiving. So I think we need to allow parents to be humans, and allow them to go along that journey, because it's the hardest job that we'll ever have.
Is and we're constantly learning as we go as well, and so we can't be too hard on ourselves, because the journey of parenting, especially when you have more than one child, because they're all different, is
Yes.
is part of the process. And to be able to embrace that, because they are with us only really for a short time,
Yeah.
and our role is to guide them, through those years, and but also to guide ourselves and to really be kind to ourselves as we navigate that journey. So yeah, it's definitely one that I think has certainly brought so much joy to my life, um, and I think it's taught me a lot more about myself as well as a human and what I'm capable of, because we are capable of so much more than we think we are. And as we navigate those challenges, or as we experience the joys, it's all part of our own self-growth as well. So, yeah. So it's been fantastic to talk about this. I'm sure we could talk about this all day, because we're both parents. We're both passionate about helping parents and children. But I'd like you to share where people can purchase your book, because I'm sure they'd love to hear the stories. I've got the book here, Weaving the Stories Together.
Yeah, so I just first want to pay tribute to the young woman who's now a new mother, Tara Dean, who was the illustrator of that book. She was somebody that we journeyed through her secondary school experience. And she did all of those illustrations, and it has made the book so beautiful. And so I gave her nothing except the book and the chapters, and she formulated all of these illustrations herself. And I said to her, I didn't know what I wanted. And then when I saw it, I thought, that's exactly what I wanted. So she is an amazing human and now a beautiful mother to a little boy. So just want to shout out to her. But the book is called, yes, Weaving the Stories Together. You can get it on Amazon Australia and purchase it there. It's also, and I don't know where your audience is, but it's also at Farrell's Bookstore, which is an independent bookstore in Mornington. So I want to shout out to them because I love independent bookstores. And also now at Eltham Bookstore, which is again an independent bookstore in Eltham.
Yep.
So they're available there. They're available online. But I'm happy for you to share my details because I also have some hard copy books if people wanted me to send them directly to them or to have a further conversation. Really happy to start those conversations more with people that want to have a sounding board. Really happy to tap in by email around those things as well. So I hope it's helpful. I've gotten feedback from a few people that it has been helpful. That's my goal. I'm not out marketing. I'm not really, it's not my primary source of income. I work full-time as head of wellbeing at a wonderful school, Peninsula Grammar School. So it is just really, hopefully, a resource for parents who just want to read what young women have told me over a very long time about what helps and what's important to them and what they need from their parents.
Fantastic. Well, I'll pop your details in the chat box below anyway, below the video, and I'm sure you'll hear from a few people, and hopefully you'll see a few more books get sold and help some more parents in raising their daughters into beautiful young women who are strong and capable, and of course with great role models. So I'd love to thank you for being here today to share your story and your expertise. It's been wonderful, and I'm looking forward to sharing this with our audience.
Okay, thank you so much.
You're welcome. Right. Well, I really hope you enjoyed this episode from our Circle of Support series of the podcast. If you would like further information about how to be in contact with our guest from today, please click on the links below. If you are a parent who is struggling with any of the issues we've raised in this episode, I invite you to book a call with me by clicking on the link below or scanning the QR code on the screen, so you can share with me what challenges you're experiencing, and I can share how I may be able to support you as you guide your child or children through their learning. Don't forget to like and subscribe to our Creating Connections podcast to continue to learn from myself and our guests how you can best support your child as they navigate their learning. I look forward to hearing from you and seeing you on the next episode in our Circle of Support series.